Nanamo watched from her private terrace as the immortal flames filed out of Ul'dah. The host left the city via the Gate of Thal, an egress symbolizing passage into the afterlife, in hopes of cheating death upon the battlefield. Crowds had gathered for the occasion, their boisterous cheers resounding through the Sultanate, but Nanamo did not hear them. She stood transfixed before the balustrade as Raubahn put his spurs to his courser, and there she remained, long after the dust had settled in the rear guard's wake. She had steeled herself for this moment, but when it finally came, she found that her courage had deserted her all the same. Suddenly, the reality of her isolation was only too plain, and the mere thought of it made her struggle for breath. I am alone. May the gods grant me strength. As the days went by, the weight of responsibility and uncertainty began to tell. Nanamo's nights were sleepless. Not even her favorite dishes would pass her lips, and her round Lalafellin cheeks took on a hollow cast. Sure enough, despite the best ministrations of her ladies-in-waiting, her health began to fail. She became a ghost of herself, and her duties went untended. Whenever a difficulty presented itself, she would invariably think, if only Raubahn were here, cursing her own weakness even as the thought took shape. She knew very well that, as Flame General, Raubahn's place was with the host at the Cartano Flats. It was his duty to lead his men into battle against the 7th Imperial Legion. I shall soon be 6 and 10 summers old. I cannot rely upon others forever. Sooner or later I must stand on my own 2 feet. I only hope I have the strength. Another meal came and went untouched. Taking her leave of the dining hall, Nanamo glanced apologetically at the silent shadow that was Pippin Tarupin, adoptive son of Raubahn and officer of the Immortal Flames. The earnest young soldier remained at her side at his father's behest. Entrusted with her care in the Flame General's absence, Pippin would never admit it, dutiful as he was, but Nanamo knew that he would sooner be fighting beside his comrades at Cartano. She could not help but feel responsible for denying him his wish. And for what? Though Pippin was his father's son, it was plain to both of them that it was the father that she needed. And so the days dragged on, each fading into the next, until the hour of reckoning came at last. Word from Mordona, Your Grace. The battle is joined. Nanamo was in the fragrant chambers, holding private audience with Thancred of the Circle of Knowing, when Pippin burst in with the tidings. A weak, I see, was all she could manage in response. When Pippin strove to hide his disappointment at this tepid utterance, Thancred was quick to make his feelings known. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but I'd hoped for something a little more rousing. Since agreeing to serve as an advisor to the Sultanate, the self-proclaimed bard had made himself at home at court, becoming ever more irreverent in the process. When last I looked, your people had need of you. What could a powerless puppet like me possibly do? Nanamo snapped back, immediately regretting her petulance. The bard was not discouraged, however, and responded with uncharacteristic force. You are not powerless, Your Grace. You can pray for Eorzea's salvation. Prayer, she thought. Has it really come to that? But of course it had. Even as they spoke, Dalamud drew closer. According to Archon Louis Soir, only by the power of the 12 could the Lesser Moon be returned to the heavens, and the coming of the 7th Umbral Era forestalled. And only by the prayers of the faithful could that power be summoned forth. It was to allow the summoning ritual to proceed unhindered that the soldiers of the Eorzean Alliance, Raubahn among them, now fought at Cartano. Thancred went on, his voice taking on a gentler tone. If you pray, so too will the people, and the combined strength of their faith shall bear their plea for Eorzea's salvation unto the heavens. A moment passed in silence. If praying is all that I can do, then I will do it with all my heart. Composing herself once more, she nodded, rose from her seat, and turned her steps towards Arzanath Ossuary. Upon arriving at the temple, Pippin helped Nanamo to her knees and stood guard as she prayed. On the far side of the city at Milvaneth Sacrarium, Thancred was doing the very same, she knew. O gods of my forefathers, deliver us from destruction. O gods of my forefathers, bring Raubahn safely back to me. A few hours into her vigil, chaos erupted. The ossuary shook violently as if struck by a giant's fist, prompting Pippin to draw close as masonry fell about them. Terrified screams filled her ears, but Nanamo did not give in to panic. In defiance of the tumults around her, she prayed with all her being. Her determination was soon rewarded. The stone plinth bearing the mark of the Dusk Trader began to glow. Moments later, a pillar of light burst forth from its surface, enveloping the image of Thal that stood upon it, and illuminating every corner of the hall. In that instant, Nanamo felt the presence of the divine. Even as she basked in the sensation, a familiar voice echoed in her mind. "Let Eorzea be born anew," it said. Louis Soir, she thought, and knew no more. Nanamo awakened to find herself lying prone on the ossuary's smooth stone floor. Footfalls rang out all about her. From the corner of her eye she saw Pippin rise to one knee, seemingly struggle to shake off the selfsame torpor which gripped her. For a time she remained still, content to gaze up at the stone plinth. Its divine light had faded, she noted dimly. A shrill yell brought her back from her reverie. "Riders at Sapphire Avenue, they're headed this way!" Consternation swept over Pippin's face. "Your Grace, we cannot linger. Let us return to the palace at once." "I will not hide while my people suffer." The answer rose to her lips, unbidden, with a swiftness that surprised even her. Rising to her feet, she surveyed her surroundings. Robed figures were scrambling hither and thither, bearing precious tomes and artifacts away, presumably to safety. At the heart of the bustle, a small yet commanding figure was barking out orders. Nanamo recognized him as Mumwepo, High Priest of the Order of Nald Thal, and Master of the Thaumaturge's Guild. "The rioters cannot be allowed to defile the ossuary," the man fairly screamed. "Incinerate any foolish enough to come near." His words set Nanamo's blood to roiling. "And you call yourself a man of the cloth?" Checking her fury, she addressed all present. "Our citizens are in the grip of fear. They but want for a voice of reason to restore them to their senses. Who among you will aid me?" Pippin stepped forward, as Nanamo knew he would. "Though I am but a poor substitute for my father, I live only to serve you, my Sultana. Pray command me as you see fit." Next came Papashan of the Sultan's Sworn, followed by 5 thaumaturges of the Guild, Lalafels all, and brothers besides. No more answered the Sultana's call, however. Only 7, she lamented as she took stock of her volunteers. But they will suffice. They must. With gritted teeth, Nanamo stepped out onto the stricken streets of Ul'dah. Of their own accord, her hastily assembled escort formed a protective ring around her, and together they trudged through the smoke and rubble. No matter where she looked, her eyes were met with scenes of carnage. A girl cried over the charred body of her mother. A man lay moaning, his legs crushed beneath the tons of stone. Their plight wrenched her heart, but she could not stop for them. First, she had to quell the unrest, else there could be no lasting relief. "I will return for you all. This I promise." As Nanamo's band reached Emerald Avenue, the mob of rioters came into view. Shops and homes had been ransacked in its wake, the occupants fleeing for their lives. Undaunted, Nanamo forged onward to within earshot of the advancing rabble, where she stopped, took a deep breath, and set about her task. "Papashan, I must have their attention." Nodding, the elderly paladin produced a blinding flash that staggered some of the rioters. Many, however, continued their rampage, oblivious. "Thaumaturges, light up the sky." In unison, the 5 Lalafelan brothers let loose a warning barrage of spells overhead. Most impressive among these was the conflagration unleashed by the brother with the bandaged face. Those rioters who failed to take notice before did so now. Satisfied, Nanamo turned to Pippin. "Lend me your back." With a booming voice that belied her size, Nanamo addressed the rabble. "Heed me, my beloved citizens," she began. "The realm lies upon the brink of the 7th Umbral Era. Yet so long as we live, we must not forget our compassion. Now is not the time to take from your neighbor, but to proffer him the hand of succor. The brave men and women of the Immortal Flames risked their lives that we might go on with ours. Would you have them return to an Ul'dah that has torn itself apart?" Looks of shame manifested upon begrimed faces. "I ask that you be strong. Give in not to fear and despair. If we join hands in common cause, there is no hardship that we cannot overcome. Together, let us tend the wounds of our nation, of our shared home." Hearing these heartfelt words from their Sultana, the madness began to melt from the rioters' eyes, to be replaced by the gleam of reason. Soon after, a semblance of order returned to the city, and organized relief efforts commenced in earnest. Some days later, the remnants of the Immortal Flames trudged back into Ul'dah, entering the city by way of the Gate of Nald. Wounded and weary though the soldiers were, they yet had homes to which they might return. In the midst of rebuilding, Nanamo issued a decree stripping Mimwepo of all official titles and accompanying privileges. Though such an act would ordinarily have been beyond her authority, it was made possible owing to clever maneuvering on Pippin's part. Evidence of rampant corruption was found, with the High Priest in its midst, and his order had no choice but to abide by the Sultana's will. In place of the incarcerated Mimwepo, the 5 Lalafellan brothers were made joint masters of the Thaumaturge's Guild. In the months and years that followed, Nanamo often revisited the events of that fateful day. "I'm not powerless," she would remind herself. "There are things that even a puppet might achieve." If she could do her duty as Sultana in the midst of the calamity, she could surely carry out the task to come. So that was the second of the Tales from the Calamity, first published August 22, 2014, as part of the ARR first anniversary event. As this event canonically marked the 5-year anniversary of the 7th Calamity, these tales are all concerned with the events and aftermath of the Calamity from the perspective of key characters, in this case, the reigning Sultana of Ul'dah, 17th in the line of Ul, Her Grace Nanamo Ul Namo. Now, since it seemed to go down pretty well last time, we're going to dive a bit deeper to really digest the lore content of this tale, both in the context of where we were in August 2014 and patch 2.3, as well as what we now know 6 years later, and what we might hope to see from these characters moving into the final chapters of Shadowbringers and beyond. Naturally, we'll start with Nanamo herself. As mentioned in the tale, Nanamo Ul Namo was 16 at the time of the Calamity, and of course 21 at the beginning of ARR. She was actually pretty elusive in 1.0. I believe the only time we actually saw her before 2.0 was in the 1.0 Echo flashback of her celebration of Raubahn's 1000th Bloodsand victory, and subsequent ascendance to the Syndicate. I believe we saw this cutscene once again in 4.1. The event portrayed actually took place 2 years prior to 1.0 and the Calamity, so in 1570 of the 6th Astral era. But Nanamo began her friendship with Raubahn even earlier, when she was only 9 years old, and actually saved his life from a rigged Colosseum fight in 1565. A gambling ring had arranged for him to die by fixing a match that pitted him against some dozen or so opponents at once. She intervened by insisting on a fair fight, and after he easily won, he pledged that he would one day be free and commit his life to her service, which of course he did after that 1000th consecutive victory. But as much as we could easily spend an hour talking about Raubahn, and we will talk about him some more when we get to Pippin, he's not really the focus of this story. Now, we talked about Richard Mistbeard, aka Einzar Slafierson, at length in the last video. Well, here's a spicy little segue for you. Nanamo's parents were married in 1555, but not before the wedding was crashed by Mistbeard, who had not only plundered a foreign vessel laden with gifts en route, but also raided the royal vaults in Ul'dah during the celebration itself, and allegedly seduced the bride-to-be while he was at it. Now, Sestasha previously served as a secret dock for Mistbeard to unload his haul, and the Sultana's lap in Sestasha is a reference to the rumor that this haul included the chastity of Nanamo's old lady. Although this was the last of Mistbeard's known adventures, he disappeared soon after as Einzar hung up the mask. Nanamo herself was born the following year, leading to some speculation that Einzar might actually be Nanamo's real dad. Food for thought. So Nanamo ascended the throne at the tender age of 5 years old, after her father, Sasaban ul Sisiban, and mother, Nanasha ul Nasha, passed away, about whom we knew nothing save the Mistbeard rumors at the time this story was published, that is to say during patch 2.3, actually not even their names. There was a narrative floating around that her father died in an accident at sea, but nothing about her mother. This wasn't clarified until 4.1, where we spent some time chaperoning Nanamo pending her decision to release Raubahn from her service that he might return to Ala Mhigo. She explained to us then that they had actually died in a rockslide at the Unholy Air upon returning from a tour out to eastern Thanalan. She suspects, quite rightly, that an assassination seems very likely to have been orchestrated by the monetarists, probably Teleji or Lolorito, so that her father could be replaced by a more malleable puppet in the form of the infant Nanamo. This balance of power in favor of the few most wealthy citizens in Ul'dah, aka the Syndicate, over the Sultanate might have been the most extreme in Nanamo's lifetime, but it began shifting almost 400 years ago. Ul'dah conquered Sildir in 1181. 40 years later, a Huron noble named Baldulf Thorn learned the truth of the Trader's Spurn, the alchemical weapon which Ul'dah had used against Sildir under siege to turn their dead into zombies. The guilty Sultan, Sasagan ul-Sisigan III, was deposed and imprisoned, and the Thorns agreed to rule as stewards until Ul'dah was deemed stable enough to be handed back over to the Ul dynasty nearly 200 years later. During the Thorn dynasty, Ul'dah was relocated to its modern-day location almost directly over the ruins of Sildir and was properly established as a mercantile power, dominating Eorzea's trade with the Near East and beyond. So, when the Ul dynasty was restored to the throne, it was little more than a formality, as the true power had been held by the merchant class for some time, and the formation of the Syndicate in 1401 as the state's government was basically a foregone conclusion. So when Raubahn earned his seat on the Syndicate in 1570, he became the first and only representative there of the royalist faction, not only in Nanamo's lifetime, but quite likely in the entire history of the Syndicate. He was the one and only appendage by which the Sultana could wield non-trivial political power. He was also, of course, her one true friend and trusted advisor among a court of spies and vultures. When he left for Cartano, she basically had lost this appendage and confidant with no guarantee that he would ever come back. She did still have Pippin to Rupin, and I believe that this story was the first mention of Pippin anywhere, since he did not appear in-game before 2.55, where he and Bremont rescued Alphino from the Bloody Banquet. We have a story dedicated to Pippin and his background as part of Tales from the Storm, which we will eventually get to in this series, but the short version is that Pippin was sold into slavery at the Blood Sands when he was 12 by his biological father to pay off his drinking and gambling debts. As part of his gladiatorial training there, he was eventually assigned to Raubahn as an attendant, who in turn eventually saved up enough gold to buy Pippin's freedom. Pippin obviously didn't want to return to his father, so he convinced Raubahn to let him stay at the Blood Sands and train with him. So Raubahn adopted Pippin, and although he wouldn't allow him to fight, they lived together at the Colosseum for several more years until Raubahn freed himself. We have to imagine that part of Raubahn's impulse to protect Pippin from the barbarity of the Colosseum informed his ordering of Pippin to stay behind in Ul'dah during the Battle of Cartano, but it was obviously just as much to ensure that Nanamo was left with someone that he trusted as unconditionally as she trusted him, should he not return home alive. All the same, Pippin was not much older than Nanamo, and nowhere near as experienced or influential as Raubahn, so naturally the 16-year-old Nanamo felt pretty disempowered and isolated. Not to mention the fact that Ul'dah, unlike the other city-states, was being regularly overrun by Voidsent in the days and weeks prior to the Calamity. Thancred is of course there to help put Louis Soir's plan into motion, and his insistence that Nanamo pray at the Mark of Thal isn't just some vapid consolation. We know now that these shrines to the 12 had been primed by the Sharlians to behave something like giant signal-boosting aurosites in an FMA-style Eorzea-wide geometric pattern to basically facilitate Louis Soir's rite of summoning. The precise nature of her prayers to deliver Eorzea from destruction and to bring back Raubahn would probably have also informed Louisoix's ability to take the form of Phoenix, which of course we did not know about at the time of publishing, but which is pretty clearly foreshadowed here. Then, of course, we know that the Calamity descended and rioting began in Ul'dah. And the phenomena which informs and inspires this kind of panic during an astrally charged calamity is something we understand a lot better now. But let's talk about Mumwepo first. Mumwepo was, of course, the head priest of the Order of Nalthal and subsequently the master of the Thaumaturge's Guild prior to the calamity. There was a faction involving Neil Frayne, Flamin, and other young Ul'dah elites who wanted to pressure Ul'dah into declaring war on Garlemald, with whom Mumwepo conspired in 1562 after they accidentally killed Minfilia's father Warburton, as he arrived in Ul'dah to deliver integral Garlean intelligence to the Eorzean alliance from Alamigo, likely concerning the Meteor project. Mumwepo helped Neil Frayne acquire the blade Heartstrike, which was supposed to temporarily resurrect Warburton in order to recover this information, but Neil Frayne was murdered before they could see their plan to fruition. Most of us suspected that this was perpetrated by a Garlean assassin, but we learn in the Stormblood Alchemist questline that Grindfar, at least, believes it to have been orchestrated by the Monetarists in order to delay or prevent war. We know that Lolorito, for one, had been working hard to keep the Garlean conflict from enveloping Eorzea for as long as possible. We also learned from the Stormblood Alchemy quests that after Neil Frayne's death, Mumwepo began using Heartstrike to experiment on his corpse as well. Mumwepo for this, for embezzlement, and for countless other unelaborated crimes uncovered according to this story by investigations spearheaded by Pippin, was imprisoned and has been since fighting on the Blood Sands, basically in an attempt to make bail. It is in this context that we find him and his enthralled manticore, Narasimha, in Halatali hard mode. He was replaced by the Lolabuki brothers, led by the eldest Kokobuki, with his bandaged face, 5 of the titular Sultan 7, alongside Pippin, and of course Papashan, former second-in-command of the Sultan Sworn during the reign of Sasaban, and Nanamo's personal bodyguard upon her own succession. He is now retired from the Paladin life, but still takes pretty much any excuse to make a comeback, and chaperones Nanamo whenever she takes her incognito excursions as Lady Lyra. Now, the challenge faced by the Sultana and her 7 in quelling the riots is actually better understood by us having completed Shadowbringers. The phenomena of the 7th Calamity was a sudden and extreme injection of astrally charged ether into the source at this very moment. It caused an imbalance in everything, right down to the bodies and minds of people exposed to this corrupted ambience. The Thavnarian Kriegstands dancers of Troop Falseum during the Dancer questline quelled rioters across Eorzea that had been mentally afflicted by the Calamity in such a way that over time festered and coalesced into the Totentans, or Dance of the Damned. What the rioters that Nanamo faced were experiencing might be thought of as an early stage of this affliction, and her demonstration of resolve and unity would have helped them literally rebalance their internal ethereal composition. Her words affected them like a bard might. Basically, she delivered a speech so effective that it assumed them en masse. So, when forced to face a crisis without Raubahn, Nanamo proved to herself and everyone that she could stand on her own 2 feet. She inspired and earned the confidence of the Ul'dah masses, and here began her journey to the eventual confidence to release Raubahn from service, and the decision to abdicate the throne and reform the state into a republic controlled by neither the Sultanate nor the Monetarists. This is no doubt the task to come, hinted in the final line of the story, foreshadowing the events of 2.55 and the Bloody Banquet. Her plan to abdicate was of course what prompted Telegi's assassination attempt against Nanamo once he caught wind, and Lolorito afterwards convinced her that It was not time to so upset the status quo, at least not until the Garlean threat had been completely circumvented. Of course, the Garlean threat will be circumvented soon enough, and just like Merlwyb and the Galadian Accord in Limsa Lominsa that we discussed last time, it will be very interesting to see what chain of events the war's end will set off in Ul'dah. But that's about all the time we have for Tales from the Calamity Part 2, the Sultan of 7. Next up will be Of Friends Lost and Found, featuring Kani Senar. Patrons and Twitch subs will have early access to each part as soon as they're ready via the respective channels on our Discord server, which you can find linked below. So thank you so much to our patrons and Twitch subs. If you have any trouble accessing those channels, just ping me on Discord and I'll sort you out. Until next time, everyone, like, sub, share, comment. Please stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.